Thank you for welcoming today. I've just had a slightly frazzled journey from Birmingham, so I do apologise if I'm just a little bit off kilter. So, as you heard, I'm Specialist Midwife for Homeless and Migrant Women, which is a new role within our trust, and it was put in place in 2000, well, the advert went out 2015-16 in response to the influx of migrant women that were having in asylum seekers. When I was appointed to the role, that's what I thought I would be looking at and mostly supporting those women, and actually found that it was the homeless women that made a majority of my caseload. Around 2/3 to now 3/4 of my caseload is supporting me with housing and homelessness issues. And that's not surprising, because if you look at the statistics from the government, in 2017, 3,820 women were accepted as homelessness duties, so needing homelessness responses by local authorities. And that is only the women that are approaching the councils for support, not the women that are sofa surfing, staying with friends, who are the hidden homeless, or women who are street homeless. So actually that number is far lower than who is actually out there. So when I started in this role, my numbers doubled significantly in my second year. So for the second year of my role, I had around 157 referrals. Last year, March to April this year, I've had 170 referrals. So it is increasing in line with what we're seeing currently as well around. There's a lot going on around homelessness, and particularly homelessness in pregnancy as well. But there's a very small evidence base to support practice with these ladies, and that's what I found. I really struggled. Very little research out there, and very little guidance to guide us as midwives. What do we do? How do we support these ladies? So really that guided me to look at primary research, put into context and actually document what these women were saying to me, what were the challenges they were facing on a day-to-day basis, to inform practice and offer recommendations for our practice moving forward to support these women. So, like I said, there isn't a lot of evidence out there, and this is kind of what it says. So actually the majority of the evidence focuses on family homelessness, parent-child interaction. And it does state that there is a decreased ability of mothers to be able to sensitively parent their children, which is really quite concerning. And obviously a child that doesn't have a secure attachment going forward can end up with emotional and behavioural problems going on throughout their childhood. Not surprisingly, homelessness is now being considered as a significant contributor to adverse childhood experiences, and homelessness does sadly feature quite significant in several serious case reviews over the last 10 to 12 years, which is also very sad. But if we take a step back and we look at what is the impact of homelessness on pregnancy, we see low birth weight in babies. And these studies that have been done, it is only a small amount of studies, but they've been large-scale studies, majority of them in America, that have shown even when you account for ethnicity, even when you account for substance misuse, smoking, an out-of-home situation or a housing instability contributes to a low birth weight baby, and that's babies below 2.5 kilos and babies below 2 kilos. And in some studies there's also been documented a 3 times increased risk of preterm labour. So we do have high risk for these babies, but if we take that back a step further, what is happening to these women during pregnancy? Their mental health, significant impact on their mental health, isolation, social isolation, lack of support. If that's going on in their lives, it's not surprising we've got this decreased ability to sensitively parent their children moving forward. We've also got unsuitable locations of the homelessness accommodation. That in itself creates a big barrier for accessing antenatal education, accessing antenatal appointments, and being able to attend those really important appointments just to make sure the baby's growing okay. And if we're missing these women and not advising them and supporting them, we may well end up with our low birth weight babies. So when I also looked at this research, it was quite sad to see that there were very few papers from the UK, like I said, predominantly from America and Canada, but also very little that actually documented the experiences of pregnant women entering homelessness during their pregnancy, and that's what I wanted to look at. So I was quite fortunate in that I was able to identify women who'd become homeless through pregnancy through the database that we use at our trust. And I wanted to have women who had given birth within the last 3 to 12 months. I didn't want pregnant women because I didn't want to increase their distress of what was going on. They had to be English speaking. Unfortunately, I couldn't get funding for translators. So I ended up with 14 eligible women in that category. And I ended up doing them 5 semi-structured interviews with the women coming and discussing their experiences. I recorded their interviews and transcribed them, and then did a thematic analysis to put together the concepts of what they were saying. Now, we tend to think of out-of-home women as sometimes young parents, people on the streets, substance misuse issues, domestic abuse issues, but actually, my women were older, and I don't see a lot of young women. I do see older women. And when you look at the causes, the leading causes within the UK at the moment are evictions, selling properties, and family breakdown, relationship breakdown. And my research sort of echoed that from the women that I was seeing. We had landlords selling properties and in evictions, a relationship breakdown, and a letting agency eviction due to arrears. And the ladies became homeless at different gestations throughout their pregnancy, from quite early on through to 34 weeks. And while they were homeless, they moved around quite a lot. There was only one lady that was put in a service department. But the others sofa surfed, moved to B&Bs, back to sofa surfing, were in travel lodges and then bed and breakfasts, or travel lodges and temporary flats or council-run hostels. But essentially, all these women were still homeless at the end of their pregnancy. This is where it could get interesting. This is where it starts to get a bit more technical. So, from analysing the data, I was able to pick out 3 themes. And the first theme was looking at their journey through homelessness, what these women experienced as they became homeless. And none of them had been homeless before. They didn't know what to expect. They didn't know what was going to happen. They didn't know who to approach.
I'm 27 now, and I'm not a kid, but I just feel really vulnerable. I felt like a little girl, and I was just a bit lost, and I didn't know what to do. Initially, I was looking for refugees or things like that because I didn't know. I'd never thought about that type of thing before. I was just trying to look at what avenues there were for women in my state to do, which I didn't really find much use, or I didn't find much resources for women that are pregnant.
So alongside that uncertainty, not knowing where to look, a common emotion was shock. How were they going to cope? How were they going to move? How were they going to do all the things that needed to go with being homeless? And they were really quite scared. However, one of the women, Aisha, she was looking forward to becoming homeless because the conditions that she lived in a rented property were so poor, she was looking forward to moving somewhere different.
At the end, we were happy to get the letter. We were so happy, and we were like, oh, this is the way out, and at least we can get a nice place. We can't live like this.
But ultimately, all of the women found the day of eviction stressful, and that's not surprising with what was going on and being pregnant on top. And because of the uncertainty of the situation, they really wanted to find someone who was going to look after them and be kind. But they spoke about the length of the time that they were spending going to the council to wait. For some women, waiting all day to be allocated accommodation, waiting until the doors had closed. And for some women, going back day after day after day until something suitable was found.
I went to the city council and they give me a house 40 minutes from the city centre maybe. But I tell them the situation, that I was pregnant, I was diabetic, I had 4 children going to the school. And then they said, okay, you go to the home and you come tomorrow and maybe we try and find something in the city.
And with some of the women, when they were moved, had a vague idea of where they were placed. But they were to the extremes of West Midlands County, which West Midlands County is quite big, and some actually in the neighbouring county. So they then had issues with getting children to school. Their days were longer, they were more tired, on top of their pregnancy, and also the multiple moves that they were going through. Being pregnant put an extra stress on them.
Then they move you to a different place, and they move you to a different place. And that's the hardest bit. The more hotels they keep on taking us, it takes all my energy. I'm pregnant, heavily pregnant, and I have to pack everyone.
Then on top of that, the lack of facilities that I experienced in the accommodation. Travel lodges, as we all know, don't have fridges. So women who are living there for weeks on end have nowhere to store food, they have nowhere to cook. Not even, they got a kettle, but that's it. So they're putting milk on a window ledge, and that was then limiting what they could do in terms of eating healthily, and it developed quite a huge reliance on junk food, and this was quite a large section of the discussions that we had in the interviews around how it impacted on them.
They only provide breakfast every morning, same cereal. I basically lived off sandwiches for lunch and my dinner. Sometimes we'd get cooked food from my friend's house, and it'd get cold. We'd have to eat cold food.
And that then also led on to concerns in labour and how that impacted on their pregnancy and labour.
It was very difficult, and a pregnant lady has to eat junk food every day. Different junk food. Sometimes you get belly aches, and the harm it was causing me, I didn't realise it. That when I had the baby, when I was giving birth, it was so difficult because I was so constipated.
So all of this also had a massive impact on finances on women because of the travelling to and from for children and buying junk food. They actually found they became in debt. They weren't allowed to access local welfare provision at the end of it when they finally moved because they were told that they should have been able to save up. So under all these pressures, psychological distress was quite a key theme, and the women explained that they became very upset and very anxious with what was going on.
I was very anxious. I was actually a mess. There were constant arguments outside of the room. I rang the council and broke down on the phone. I didn't want to be there.
Some of them had quite conflicting emotions. They felt it was a good thing to be moved out, but then equally they wouldn't want their worst enemy to be placed in temporary accommodation because of the impact it had on them and their families. And some women then found that it actually was nice to have their own little space, but the restrictions that were placed on them, they had to sign in every day, they couldn't be out at night. It impacted on their fears then of labour and birth, that actually they were still going to be there when they were having their babies.
And I mean, you weren't allowed out after a certain time in the night, and then you weren't allowed out for a certain time in the morning. And I'm just like, well, what happened if I'd have gone into labour and I couldn't get out the doors because there was nobody at the desk after 11 o'clock until the following morning? And I'm like, wow, there'd have been no one to call. There'd have been nothing, like nowhere to get out.
I've seen the ladies that had a baby in there, and they're like, we've been here for half a year. And I had my baby. I literally thought, I'm going to have the baby in there. I mean, she had it, I'll be the same. I'll be having the baby in there. So what am I going to do?
And as I said, all these women remained homeless at the time of giving birth. So several of them were still in bed and breakfast accommodation, and one moved back to sofa surfing because she didn't want her baby to grow up in that accommodation.
When we finally moved...
Hang on. Right. So then the next theme was support. So women found that support was really important to them, and support is cited as a psychological buffer to homelessness. But they did find that even when they spoke about the absence of it, it seemed to highlight its importance even more. And this sort of seemed about the time where they wanted help moving or just with food. And I said food was a really common theme throughout their experiences, just to help them at meal times. And actually, because of the moves that they were experiencing and across the city, social isolation became quite key.
The thing that really made me sad was the friends that I thought would be there for me wasn't there when I needed them. And seeing that from a friend that used to help, even some of them were homeless, and I was there wasn't, didn't even offer me one bit, and it literally broke my heart.
Women did say that they really highly valued the support they got from their midwives. The empathy and the kindness that the women found from midwives really made them feel that they were cared for, that somebody actually cared for them going through this process. And they felt the midwives were somebody that they could talk to actually allay some of their fears. And there was also even just tiny thoughtful actions from hotel staff by letting them use a microwave or just a washing machine that made a massive impact on these women and helped them move forward. They were really critical of the council and their lack of empathy, but actually the one woman that helped, Rama, she didn't feel that she could express quite in words how that made her feel.
Oh, yeah, I wanted to cry because when you're in a very difficult situation and somebody helps you, oh my goodness, I said thank you so much, thank you, thank you, thank you, but that was better if I give her a hug.
And you really felt how much these small actions of people made such an impact on these women's lives going through what they were going through. Like I said, they were very critical of the local authority. They were approaching the authority at a really vulnerable time. They knew services were busy. They could see that they were busy by sitting there. But the lack of empathy that was towards them, the women just felt that they were a number, part of a process, not a pregnant woman with specific needs.
You're like, I'm heavily pregnant, and they're like, we don't care. Sorry, everyone is an emergency, everyone needs the services, and we can't help you. We know you're pregnant, but we cannot support you.
And all the women commented about the inadequacy of services in general. That be from midwifery services through to the acknowledgement and understanding of local authorities, and even support workers didn't quite get exactly what they needed and how they were feeling. But the women had really clear ideas about what they wanted, how the services could be improved, and how they could be more empathetic to their needs, and they weren't backward in coming forward in saying those.
I just think there should be a special system for women that are pregnant, because the other people, they can stay, they can wait long, and when you're pregnant, oh my goodness, not like other people.
So those two themes culminated in the final one, which was the impact on pregnancy, the impact of being homeless during pregnancy. And within this study, the women felt that actually their pregnancy was being pushed aside. Their pregnancy was not a priority. It was completely and utterly inferior to the activities of daily life. And that was really quite sad, because when we look at how these women are bonding with their babies and we look at the research, if they're not bonding with their baby during pregnancy, is it no wonder that they've got a decreased ability to sensitively parent their children moving forward?
I was like focusing on him growing and my belly health and stuff, but I was constantly thinking, I need to do this and I need to do that and I need to fix this and I need to make this much or do this, or just constantly trying to better myself, but just not actually being present in my pregnancy.
I was doing only packing. When you're pregnant and you're going through all this movement, all this packing up, it's very difficult. I had to worry about filling in paperwork, about travelling. Even when I'm sleeping, I'm thinking, you have to do that, you have to do this.
Sometimes I even forget that I was pregnant. You have a little problem, yeah, and when you see more than that problem, you forget the little one, yeah? Sometimes I forget that I was pregnant. Even I cannot sit because all day I was going there or going there.
And I knew when women weren't attending their appointments, it may well be because they had issues with transport, they weren't able to attend for certain reasons, but I didn't quite understand fully until Aisha said the following.
And they put me through far away, and I don't know. I'm really stressed. I can't come. Sometimes I have to tell them I can't come, and I ignore the calls. You can't come because you're far away, or you can't come because you're really tired and stressed, and you can't go. Or sometimes you can't go because of the weather, and it's cold. You can't. You don't want to go. You're tired of going out because of the food.
And again, that highlights how important that food issue was when they're constantly going out every single day for meals, for children. They just, when it came to a midwife appointment and to have to go to that midwife appointment, it just wasn't their priority at that point anymore. And again, that also made me reflect on how we see women in society and pregnant women in society. And we afford pregnant women a higher status in society. We see them as a time of emotional vulnerability, a time when they're growing a new person inside of them. They have a sacred status within within our communities and within public transport, when we sit on a bus and we get up to let somebody sit down instead. But from the moment these women who were pregnant approached the councils for support, that sacred status of pregnancy became undermined from the attitudes all the way through, and that whole putting other people first and putting other actions first and not putting their pregnancy first. And that an empathetic approach really impacted on how they felt things should move forward.
Me being pregnant, I thought they would have helped. I thought people would be kind if you were pregnant.
We tried explaining how were we meant to be a priority if you won't do anything, and they were like, well, you are a priority, but, and I'm like, no, there's no buts. We're either a priority and you're going to help us or we're not. And as far as I can tell, they never ever wanted to help, so we obviously wasn't. I mean, I'm not sure how a newborn baby isn't a priority, because why do you want to keep them in somewhere like that? I mean, because they don't know you and you don't know your baby. You just think to yourself, okay, well, I don't need to know my baby at the minute. And then when in reality you do, and then that's how they make you feel. They're like, well, the baby can wait. It's not like the baby is here. So then you start thinking, okay, well, maybe they're right. And in reality, they're not. You shouldn't have to feel that way. You shouldn't have to feel you're pushing your pregnancy aside for them.
So with that, what next? So thinking hard about what we can do as midwives and trusts moving forward and caring for these women. So these are some of the recommendations I came out with my research. I've put into guidance that's just been ratified now for our trust. But confirming women's address, because we're getting women that were lost within the system. Basic things, confirm their address and their housing situation. At minimum booking, 28, 36 weeks non-discharge, and it's really refreshing to see the RCM document about the duty to refer for homelessness, and that also echoes these same things going forward. Increasing knowledge of the Homelessness Reduction Act and the duty to refer for women who are homeless, and that's something I'm putting as guidance. More appointments at home, increasing that engagement. Careful monitoring of fetal growth. If we've got women missing appointments, let's make sure we can get to them and actually make sure that baby's growing okay. Early help for a coordinated approach. Let's make sure we're bringing everybody together. Pregnancy support and parenting programmes to offer that and to also reduce social isolation. And innovative services for homeless pregnant women. And I'm in the middle of putting together a Facebook page for the women that come through my service. And also forging links with local authorities, and I've got a meeting with my local authority tomorrow moving forward to try and look at some of the aspects of the facilities that are available in some of the homelessness accommodation across the city, and look at actually the emergency accommodation, can we have some allocated specifically to pregnant women, and look at training. And then finally I wanted to leave you with this thought from one of our women.
But unfortunately, in the UK, there's no support. There's no financial help. Everything they're doing cut. Because of what? They can't look after pregnant women. Who can they look after? They can't look after the next generation of this country. Who can they look after if they can't look after vulnerable women who are homeless?
Do you want me to play that again?
But unfortunately, in the UK, there's no support. There's no financial help. Everything they're doing cut. Because of what? They can't look after pregnant women. Who can they look after? They can't look after the next generation of this country. Who can they look after if they can't look after vulnerable women who are homeless?
Thank you.